are back with Mrs. Cathy Hughes. Cathy, tell us about the advocacy group, the Women Against Violence Everywhere WAVE.
Okay, Wave was a really spontaneous reaction to a period in our history in Guyana when we were finding that a lot of young men were being killed, in most cases by the police. So, Women Against Violence really emerged with it started as a protest action at the cenotaph. It started as women from all races just deciding, this is totally unacceptable. We don't want to be losing our sons and our husbands to violence that's perpetuated by the police or an increase in robberies and other incidences like that. And so, what was really good about it was that it had members from a range of community women's groups all across the length and breadth of Guyana. And we started off every Friday meeting at the cenotaph for just about maybe half an hour and standing in protest. After that, it developed into a much larger group where we started to do workshops. We go out to communities. We started to discuss the family structure, support that could be provided to women that had lost, the main person that is the mainstay of the person that's providing the income for the family, if it was a husband that had been lost, women that had lost sons. So we did a lot of facilitating, of counseling and support services, some of it financial, but more or less building an awareness. And the thinking was that, look, women are able in a society to transcend several differences that might exist. Women, at the end of the day, are able to put aside political differences, financial differences in the interests of their families and their children. And so I thought it was a very productive experience. And unfortunately, there were um, some negatives, which I think eventually resulted in the demise of Women Against Violence Everywhere wave.
Hmm. What is one of the most ridiculous arguments you've either had or witnessed in Parliament, Cathy?
What is one of the most ridiculous arguments? Um, well, when we had a motion to ask that was more or less demanding that Clement Rohi step aside. And there were several things that have happened in Guyanese society in the security sector that I think he has to take responsibility for. I think in any country, when you have the high level of police violence, the high level, we had a situation where a teenager was actually burnt, and everybody knows that at the genitals. We've had people that have died in the police stations, and these are not one particular race, of all races. It cuts across all types of persons. We had Johanse Douglas, who was shot just outside of Bel Air Park. So here, the distinction is not necessarily of a particular race or a particular income generation or a level of society that you are part of. And I just felt that, the whole discussion, when you, every day in the papers, you would see that we had a security sector and a Minister of Home Affairs that was failing to stem the levels of violence that started after the 2001 jailbreak. And it's just spiraled out of control. And really, when you have, security sector reform that's offered by the British and you don't accept it, the help, and, Scotland Yard wants to help and you don't accept, and several international agencies want to help, and you just don't, you're not strong enough to say, you know what, I'm not doing a good job, and somebody else that maybe can do better needs to step up to the plate now. So that whole discussion of trying to justify how three people in Linden um, protest on the bridge and end up dead, It's not like if you think that there was, the situation was going to get out of control and therefore you attempted to arrest them or you shot them in the leg. They're shot and killed. And so that was one of the things that really I sat there thinking, how could we actually be trying to justify maintaining this system?
You know, from your seat in Parliament, what have you learned about how women parliamentarians differ from men parliamentarians?
Well, I think women parliamentarians are able to lobby and work together, and um, and can cross over some of the party lines. So as you asked me this, I think of a specific situation where we had a motion to end interpersonal violence and to put a couple mechanisms in place so Ghana could actually start to look at that in a more comprehensive way. And the motion was brought to the parliament by Debbie Backer. And I remember Debbie bringing the motion to the parliament and calling me up and saying, Cathy, look, there's so many levels of interpersonal violence in Guyana today. And then she was talking about spousal abuse, domestic violence, incest, the whole gamut, robberies, murders, everything. And I remember her calling me up saying, look, look at the motion and let me know if you thought the AFC could sign on to this. And I remember looking at the motion, speaking to my party, and there was nothing there that we could not commit to. And then I remember her, just before, a couple of days before Parliament, calling me saying she was trying to reach Gail Tafera from the PPP because she kind of wanted to make sure that this didn't have to come to the parliamentary floor. We didn't have to debate it, that we could at least speak with a common voice on the need to put mechanisms in place to reduce the levels of violence in Guyana. I mean, how could anybody not want to support that? And I remember up to the afternoon we got to the parliament, she still didn't know where the government is going to be on that. And, in the break, she said to me, why don't we just get together with Gail? Which we did. So it was myself, Debbie, Gail. We went into the speaker's chambers and we said, look, can we all commit to this motion? The government side literally only had a problem with 2 or 3 words. One of the words Debbie felt very strongly about keeping. The other 2 we could negotiate and we were able to say, yeah, no problem. Let's move them. Let's change the words. And at the end of the day, we were able to go into that parliament and speak with a united voice and agree on some mechanisms. So I think women are we're able to cut across those lines. What I think is challenging, though, is that I don't think that we have sufficiently organized a strong enough women's caucus. We had started to develop a women's parliamentary group within the 10th Parliament, but I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in that area. And I hope that future parliaments will be able to focus more on that. I think if we had a strong women's caucus and a women's parliamentary group, then we would be able to influence more the political agenda. And therefore, some things that become so deeply divided, I would like to see the women coming and negotiating compromise positions if the men in the party are unable to reach those positions. And that tends to be because everybody's keeping a score sheet. Everybody's going back to what happened 20 years ago, what happened 30 years ago. And you know what? Women are like young people. We don't care. We know what happened, but leave the past where the past is. We want to move forward. There's too much work to be done. We have to look forward.
In the chat room, Philippa asks, briefly describe Guyana as you see it 10 years ahead. Do you see another female president in our future?
Absolutely. I think we had a female president before, and I think that it is very, very possible that we will have a female president in the future. Like most Caribbean societies, and even like in the diaspora, women are the ones that are graduating from university. The women are the ones that are doing really great. I think with a few more opportunities to support them, especially when it comes to loans, microcredit schemes, and support services, more daycare facilities. I think we would be able to even see women in Guyana realize an even greater um, a position in our societies. We have a lot of women that are involved in business, in key positions, but the challenge we have is that we still have a very male dominated society. So we don't see enough of them out there as role models. There are quite a few, and I applaud them. I think immediately of people like Simona Brooms in the Women Miners Association. I think of the women that are running businesses. I think of women that are head of the banks, like Amanda St. Alban at Scotiabank. We have Beverly Harper that's running Anson McCall, which is a huge company. We're seeing more women on boards of big companies. And I just want to see more of them being able to comfortably come out and be role models and not have to worry about the fear of being attacked, the fear of victimization if you're coming a role model in terms of a political party or a political situation, a political organization. Fear is a real thing in Guyana, and unfortunately, our society really um, destroys or can destroy individual attempts to participate in the process. And I mentioned one of the negatives about WAVE, and that is what I was referring to. So many of the women that came from all different backgrounds started to feel unsafe. They started to say, "Oh, these women got to be part of some political party." And at the time, none of us were part of a political party, but you start to get branded and being shoved into a box. And women don't like to play the politics game the way it's structured today. So many of them just quietly contribute behind the scenes. And we need more of them to be out in the forefront, to be role models for other young women.
Talking about role models, Cathy, you're an entrepreneur, and what is, among other things, but what is the message you hope your journey in business, civil societies, and politics says to young girls and women?
I want to say that you can do it.
I like I like
It's
that.
don't have any questions about your ability. And I would say to them that Guyanese society, as I mentioned, is still male dominated when you look at it from the outset. But you know what? We have to open the door. So I would say to them, don't be disillusioned. Don't be worried that you will go to a private sector commission meeting, as I have done many years ago, and there will be two women there. I was there representing the Tourism Association as the president of TAG at that time, and the room was filled with about 11 or 12 other men with men representing other service organizations and within the private sector commission. And the only other woman in the room was the one taking the notes. Now, in most societies, we're a lot more conscious of things like that. We're much more conscious of equal representation. We have within our legislation, we're lucky that we have a one-third requirement. And so we're finding, even in our parliament, we do really well. We're one of the parliaments in the entire world that has one-third of the parliament, members of parliament being women. So we're opening the doors, and I'm saying to the women out there, we haven't reached where we need to be, but I know you are confident, I know you're qualified, and I know you know what needs to change. So don't be put off, just go through that door. Let's break the ceiling. Let's break the glass ceiling.
You know, Guyana is a land of six races, and we can't have this conversation without mentioning the indigenous people.
Yeah.
What can the indigenous women expect should the coalition win the elections on May 11th?
Well, if you're listening to some of the discussion, if you're listening to the reports on visits to different areas, our presidential candidate David Granger is extremely strong on the hinterland, and so APNU and the AFC has been extremely strong on areas within the hinterland. Um, Valerie Lowe, who is one of our, and we actually, out of our 5 MPs, had 2 members of parliament, both women, in Valerie Garrido Lowe and also Eula Marcelo, who came from Region 8. And they're both indigenous women. And so we have the plight of the indigenous peoples have been very, very strong in the AFC agenda and also in APNU's agenda. And so there are several mechanisms and several programs that we want to implement. And here we're talking about training institutions that are located in interior and hinterland areas. We want to look at more income generation projects. We want to look at agri processing, because there's some parts where you will go to an area and there will be mangoes just lying on the road. And I think Mr. Granger talked about this just last week. You will go to a community and the roads are laden with mangoes because there's so many mango trees. But yet, the women and the community are having trouble making ends meet. So why is it that we're not collecting those mangoes? Why is it that the women can't be employed to extract the mango nectar from the mangoes? Why are we not canning that? Why is it that we go into a supermarket in Guyana and we're going to buy mango nectar that's coming from different parts of the US or Barbados or Trinidad? And those are the kinds of things that we feel very strongly about. I know my husband recently has been talking about the lack of education opportunities for indigenous young people, the fact that the resources that they have, the fact that the lack of teachers, the facilities in schools. There's absolutely no question that there's only a very small amount of hinterland students that are able to get a sound secondary education, and we need to change that.
Jonathan in the chat room said, as someone who has worked in the media in the US and Guyana, what changes would you like to see regarding the fair and objective reporting in Guyana?